Hello. During the lecture yesterday, we hit a little bit of a sticky point when we were trying to figure out how to counter rotation changes, rotation transformation changes from within a precomposition. And I thought I'd put together this short video to show you guys what it was that we did. So let me jump to Illustrator really quick, and you guys can see that I have basically set up the same thing that I drew on the board, showing just a circle with an X attached to it. What I'm going to do in Illustrator is I'm going to basically follow the same pattern that I followed during the session in After Effects, and that is I am going to change the anchor point of this combination of items from the center point to the center of the composition. And I'll do that by choosing my rotate tool. You'll notice that I have my anchor point right here. What I'll do is I'll grab it, bring it down to the center, and place it in the center of my composition. Now with that done, then if I were to rotate this item, which I am about to do by clicking and dragging, you'll notice that the X appears now at the bottom of the screen, whereas before it was on top. When I rotate it, it's at the bottom. Think of this as our globe. So the North Pole would be where the X is, and if I rotate it, then the North Pole would be pointing south, which doesn't make any sense. So ideally we should be able to then, as we are rotating the precomposition, which is what you're looking at right here, we're rotating the precomposition, we should be able to rotate the content of the precomposition at the same time to counter the rotation. And what that means is basically we would bring back the center point to the center of the graphic, and then we would be able to rotate it so that the rotation maintains the North Pole pointing north. So let me jump back to After Effects, and basically I have the exact same setup that we saw yesterday. So I have the globe that has been masked. Behind it I have the orb of energy right here, and then behind it I have the Milky Way. What I'm going to do right now is you notice that both my whirl rotating and my energy ball are way shorter than my 6-second or my 5-second composition, which is what we were working with. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and go into the project window, select the whirl rotating. I will right click it and interpret the footage so that I can increase that to 2 loops, and that gives me roughly 5 seconds worth of footage. As you can see on the preview window up on the upper corner of the project window, you'll notice that it says now 5 seconds as opposed to 2 seconds and 15 frames. You notice that it didn't get stretched in the timeline, but you also notice that the color past the end point of the current layer changed. Let me undo that so you see the change. See how it's grayed out right now? Let me redo, and you'll notice that the color changed, which indicates to me that there's footage hidden at the end tail of that piece of footage. So what all I'll have to do now is just go ahead and stretch it by clicking on its tail end and stretch it all out. And that goes all the way to the end. I am going to do the exact same thing to the energy ball. You'll notice that it only occupies 2 seconds. I need 5 seconds, so what I'll do is I'll stretch it out to 3 turns, and that way I have an extra second worth of footage. So I'll right click on the energy ball footage in the project window. I will go interpret footage, and I will increase that to 3 loops. And then I'll do the exact same thing on the actual layer. I'll go ahead and go to the very tail end of the footage, and you'll notice that my cursor changes into those 2 little arrows. Those arrows indicate that I can click and drag, and it will reveal whatever footage happens to be behind it, which in this case is the looping star or the looping ball of energy. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and scale down the whirl to about 40%, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call its rotation values, and you'll notice that I already have set up keyframes for it. The first keyframe beginning value is 0, and the second value is +1. That means that this thing is rotating from the beginning to 215. It's rotating once. Let me drag that last keyframe out by clicking on it. And then as I am dragging it, I'll press Shift so that it snaps to the tail end of my composition. First I click, I start dragging, and then as I am dragging, I press Shift. And then it snaps to the end. So now I have the whole rotation happening in over 6 seconds. As you'll notice up in the composition window, my world is basically rotating upside down, just as we expected. In other words, halfway through it, the North Pole is pointing down, as you can see. What we want is for the North Pole to be pointing up at this point. But obviously we cannot do that because we've already applied one rotation transformation. So in order to apply a second set of transformations to this, I need to precompose the layer. And what I'll do at this point is go back to the beginning and select the layer, go to Layer, Precompose. This layer I am going to call World Rotated. And I am going to make sure I move all the attributes, meaning these two keyframes, into the new precomposition. I'll click OK, and you'll notice that I have now a new layer called World Rotated, and this World Rotated took in the rotation keyframes. It took them into the composition. So if I select the layer and I press R for rotation, you'll notice that I do not have any rotating keyframes outside of the composition. But if I double click in the composition to open it, select the layer and press R, now you'll see that the two original keyframes are here inside the World Rotated, not in the main comp, but inside the precomposition. That said, then all I have to do is counter the rotation on the outside. In the inside, the rotation goes from 0 to 1 rotation, as you see, 0 to 1. Okay, so all I got to do now is go back to the composition, to the main composition, and I need to go from 0 at the beginning to -1 at the end. That counters the rotation. And if I scrub my video now, you'll see that my world is rotating. You see the outline of the layer rotating, but you notice that my world remains right side up. All I have to do now is just simply offset the anchor point, and my world will remain right side up. Let me call its anchor point value. I will offset the anchor point to place the world on the left side of the orb, and as I scrub, you'll notice that my planet's North Pole is always pointing up. So that is basically what we did to counter. We rotated the way we originally intended, but you notice that we needed to reverse the rotation on the artwork itself, and to do that we had to create a precomposition. This will counterbalance the original rotation, and it will maintain our artwork the way we intend to show it. I hope this little bit helps. Thanks.